I've been working on this game for 2 weeks now, and I'm finally ready to show off how I got to this point. But first, let me tell you about my game. It's a mobile game about playing as a spider on your web. You need to catch insects with your web to make sure you don't starve to death, but that isn't the only way you can lose. You also need to watch out for weather, as rain can blow you or your food off your web. I will talk more about the gameplay loop in the next devlog once I have it blocked out. I went for a very simple color palette with a monochrome background and the spider always being a complementary color to it. I will have different levels with their own color palettes and environment, along with their own set of environmental hazards. The first thing I worked on was the web, as all the gameplay revolves around it. I wanted the web to be able to move around when force is applied to it, so it doesn't look so static and boring. I looked around and found a few solutions, but I ended up going with a method where I first generate a certain amount of points between two positions. This creates a line of points. After this, I use a line renderer to connect them all and hide the points. So now we have a line, but it doesn't look much like a web yet. So I made a script to generate a certain amount of these lines in a circle. Now we have the base of the web. I made a script that connects the points with their neighbors, and now we can add a force that will influence a certain point, and it will carry through the web. Then I connected a few rings of points, and that's how we ended up with this web. Now we have a fully procedurally generated web, and I can make it look like just about anything. Now that the web was done, it was time to move on to the spider. So I started on the legs. I made a quick leg model in Blender, and I rigged it. I added spheres into the joints to make sure that when deforming, there is no gaps in the mesh. Then in Unity, I added inverse kinematics to the bones, and after about 20 tries and 4 tutorials, I got it working. Now I had to make the leg snap to the closest point on the web. I really liked how it looked, so I made a cube with spider legs to test it out. And it looked questionable, so I made it a sphere, which helped a little. At this point, I was pretty sick of the graphics, so I decided to add in the assets from the concept art. I first started by adding the mountain and positioning it so it looks good on camera. Next, I added the grass in the ground plane, which I had modeled as one object in Blender. I will be changing this in the future by making a grass shader. This way, I can make it sway in the wind and respond to weather. Next, I made a simple shader for everything. This way, I could control the colors of the gradients and emission intensity. I noticed that adding emission to your materials makes it look much more stylized and is perfect for the look I'm going for. I added the sky and made it a little darker so the mountain would stand out. I also removed all lighting from the scene. But now the spider was looking quite boring, so I made a simple spider model out of just 2 spheres and I added the shader to it as well. I made a new material for the eyes and I added 2 more spheres to the model. I will definitely be changing the model in the future, but for now it's perfect. It looked pretty good, but the proportions were completely off, so I made it look more like a spider. And I also changed the colors of the world once again to make it look more pleasing. I also made the legs linearly interpolate to the next position, and I finally had something that looked like a spider moving. While I liked how creepy the legs looked when they snapped to the position, this definitely made it look more natural. I would like to add a sine wave to displace the leg as it moves from one position to the other, but I couldn't seem to get it working earlier. Well, it worked, but it definitely didn't look like how a spider would move. So, I'll come back to this later. At this point, I was very happy with the look of my game, and I can't wait to make more maps. I drew lots of inspiration from these monochrome landscapes I found on Google. I really liked how simplistic it looked. And this brings us up to how the game currently looks. I'm going to work on a gameplay loop next, so stay tuned for the next devlog. It looks like the spider caught a subscribe button.